I just tried to catch that sick calf again. I let him out last night because he wasn't eating, and it looked like he was doing a little bit better, and he wasn't eating. And so I went ahead and let him out and let him come out here, and he ate. And just a minute ago, he was actually sitting in the barn, but there he is right there. He was sitting in the barn, and I was like, maybe I can catch him real fast and just leave him in here until I get back from work. But he ran for it. So, but I mean, you know, he's doing a little bit better. I'll have to see what's going on. You know, yesterday I was actually reading, I went on a Google Scholar, and I just typed in calf mortality, cattle calf mortality. And I actually found out that, you know, in terms of a realistic sense, in terms of it just is what it is, there was an experiment conducted on 3 separate size herds. There were, you know, multiple herds. I don't exactly know how many herds there were, but they broke the herds up into less than 100 animals, less than 200, or between 100 and 200 animals, and then over 200 animals. And in turn, it was a cow-calf business. So it was a cow calving, and so even in a cow calf scenario, and they found that across the board, it doesn't matter how many animals there are. If you have under 100 animals, between 100 and 200 animals, and over 200 animals, they actually found that the mortality statistic was the same, and that's and it's about 8.2%. So I was reading this study, and they actually found that 8.2% of calves die at birth. And so that's you know, the calf legitimately dies when it's born. About 8% of all cattle, from the study that I was reading, and they actually found that the number was about the same across the entire the three herd sizes. And so they were you know, but I mean, there's a lot of reasons for calves to die at birth, right? You know, and I've always talked about this. The whole thing about the cattle business, it's like it's not a Disneyland. You know, it's not like you're going on a trip to Disneyland. All right. You know, cattle are you know, they're living, breathing creatures just like we are, right? I mean, they're not invincible. All right. If you legitimately think, you know, the whole thing about farming is that it's not a Disneyland journey. Nobody cares. You know, it's not a Disneyland journey. Okay. You know, if you legitimately think that all cattle survive all the time, then you're a naive moron, right? I've talked about this all the time. You're either very stupid or you're very naive, all right? Even 100% of human beings don't survive birth, right? There are a lot of human beings that die when they're born. I mean, you know, especially in impoverished countries, right? Like if you start going into a third world country, you know, I've always said that one of the biggest statistics for knowing whether or not a country, you know, is developed medically, is more of a first world country, is to take a look at their infant mortality. How many of their babies die when they're born? Right? That's one of the biggest statistics, right? And that's the same thing with the cattle. I mean, it's not like, oh my God, you know, cattle are some, you know, some magical creature, and they just survive. All of them just survive all the time. And if you just go skipping off into Disneyland, then you just end up in a magical journey. That's not how it works. All right. And I was actually, and I've even given you my numbers, right? The whole thing about my numbers is that I legitimately give you my numbers. You know, when it comes to doing a business like this, I may legitimately be one of the best on the planet. Legitimately one of the best on the planet. All right. And I give you my numbers, right? And and as of today, my cattle mortality, in terms of how many animals do I lose. But here's the thing. I actually don't remember the last time I lost an animal under 500 pounds ever. I don't think I've ever lost an animal over 500 pounds. Actually, no, there is one time I lost an animal over 500 pounds. And that was when I had him on a finishing ration. I had him on a finishing ration, and one of the calves bloated to death on it. So I did have an animal that died that was over 500 pounds. One time that it happened, it was because the animal bloated to death on a finishing ration. I was told that the ration could be fed free choice, but one of my animals just ate a lot, and he ended up bloating to death on it. So that's the one time I lost an animal over 500 pounds. But I'm just going to give you my numbers because it is what it is. My cattle mortality is about 12%. All right, I lose about 12% of my animals. And in terms of a realistic sense, that is actually very good. That is very good when you consider the business that I am in. And you also need to understand, and here's the thing that, and this is actually a very realistic way to look at it. Cattle, when they're born, all right, when they are born, about 8% of them die. About 8% of them die, okay? They die, they die while being born, all right? About 8% of them do. That's, there could be all sorts of reasons for it, right? They died, it was a difficult labor, right? The calf died. Maybe even the mama cow died, right? I mean, the calf was born stillbirth, right? Maybe the calf was born in bad weather. Maybe, whatever, animals killed the calf. Something happened, right? And the animal died. About 8% of all calves die at birth, okay? That's what I have read. That was the information that I read. I just went on Google Scholar and I looked up cattle calf mortality and I just looked at the number. All right, there are a lot of studies done on this and you can look into it yourself. And I give you my numbers as it just is what it is, all right? It just is what it is. My mortality, my cattle mortality is about 12%. I lose about 12% of my animals, and effectively over 90% of that, over 95% of the animals that I lose are under 500 pounds, maybe even under 350. All right, and that, that's also why I say things like if you start going under 350, you're entering the danger zone, right? That's effectively the data point that I utilize. Within okay, so the sale barns are closed next week, all right? The sale barns are closed next week. And I got I'm taking a look at my cattle and I got to start liquidating my animals here pretty soon. But here's the thing, all right? And this is why I got to get everything lined up in a row, because if I don't, this is what's going to happen. All right, when I start liquidating my animals, and let's say I deleverage myself, I just take the money and I clear away, all of my debt. I clear away all of my debt, and let's say that I have 30 animals. All right, I have 0 debt and I have 30 animals, or 20 animals, or whatever it may be. All right, 25 animals, 30 animals. It'll be about 30 animals. So I have about 30 animals and I have 0 debt, right? If I have 30 animals and I have 0 debt, and those 30 animals are stabilized and have gone up in value while they were being stabilized, right, then there will be a positive equity evaluation to those 30 animals, right? Very simple concept to understand. The calves got bigger while I was stabilizing them, and the 30 animals is entirely my own money. I don't owe the bank anything. Even if I lost 10 of those 30 calves, I would still have 20 cattle of my own money, and those 20 calves would have gone up in value, right? Then I would leverage against that. It doesn't matter, right? If it's my money, it doesn't matter, right? If it's my money, and this is also why I suggest always investing your capital first. This is one of the things that, when I take a look at it in terms of a financial strategy, it will save you from going bankrupt. It will keep you out of bankruptcy territory forever, all right? You will never get close to bankruptcy if you do this. All right, I don't ever get close to bankruptcy, all right? And this is one of my financial strategies. I invest my capital first, I stabilize my asset, and then I leverage against it. That's, and when I do that, I leverage against 70%. I don't ever leverage myself to the eyeballs, right? If you're legitimately using every single dollar that you make, that's a very poor person thing to do. Because if you think about that in terms of a fundamental idea, like imagine that I started doing that. If I started using every dollar that I made, how long do you think it would take for me to become poor? Right, I went to the Lamborghini dealership and I bought 3 Lamborghinis. Then I went to the Gucci store and I bought a whole wardrobe full of Gucci clothing. And then I went to the Rolex store and I bought myself a Rolex. Right, it would effectively take me 12 hours, right? You don't want to be, fundamentally in terms of a broader idea, you do not want to be using every dollar that you make. That's very bad. All right, I've even spoken. I've spoken about this about the last couple of days in terms of the financial strategies that I use to keep myself away from. My financials are massively in the positive, right? I legitimately generate so much money that I don't even worry about money. That's the situation that I'm in. I don't worry about money at all. I don't know how else to tell you this. I am legitimately not concerned about money at all. 0%. Legitimately 0%. That's one of, when you take a look at my financial situation, you have to understand and I've always said that there is a very, it's like a very, I don't know how to describe the feeling. I wouldn't say it's good, but there is a feeling, and I would say that I guess it's very peaceful. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just very good to not be in a situation. If you're having financial problems, it's very worrisome. All right, that's another way to put it. Like me, not having to worry about money puts me in a situation where I'm just it's whatever. All right, and I've always, the whole thing is you should try it. Once you understand what it feels like, it's like, why would I ever put myself in financial hot water, right? I legitimately don't have to worry about money forever. I don't have to worry about money forever. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. My business is growing. When I take the money that my business makes and I just put it back into my business legitimately grows by over 10% a month, compounding. I legitimately don't have to worry about money at all. 0%. And, that's very good, right? That's a very good feeling. I don't know how else to describe it other than, you should try it. It's a very, very, very just kind of just, like I can buy anything on the planet, just about. I can legitimately just go and buy anything, and I don't have to worry about money. It's whatever, right? It's a very good feeling. I don't know if I'd call it good, but it definitely, because if you're worried about money, chances are that you're going to be kind of miserable. Chances are, it just is what it is. They say money cannot buy happiness, but being poor is not going to make you happy either. All right. And I would rather, and I've spoken about this. The whole thing is like, me, I've gone from working for minimum wage all the way up to effectively making more money than anybody on the entire planet. And I would rather choose to make more money than everybody I would choose to make a massive sum of money than minimum wage. I would rather make a massive sum of money. I'm just flat out honest about it, okay? All right, it's just, that's how I see it. And I'm not a malicious person about this. it just is what it is. All right, it just is what it is. All right, I'm not being a malicious person about it. All right, but it is kind of just, it's just kind of like it's like dang, I can legitimately just go and do anything. Legit, that's what it is. All right, like anywhere that I go, I can buy anything. I can legitimately buy anything anywhere that I go. If I go to the grocery store, I can buy whatever I want. If I go to the department store, I can buy whatever I want. Right? I legitimately, and I wouldn't say want, I can buy whatever. Granted that I'm not going to go to the Lamborghini dealership and buy 3 Lamborghinis. I legitimately don't have to worry about money at all. Legitimately 0 concerns about money. All right, my business is growing. I just take the money that my business makes and I grow my business with it. And along the way, if I feel like buying something, I just buy it. All right, my business is growing, and here's one of the big issues that I have right now. Okay, when I deleverage myself, if I have 30 animals, right? If I deleverage myself and I have 30 animals left over, those 30 animals will have gone up in value, and I will have 0 leverage, right? So effectively, I will be selling, let's say that I raise the animals for 5 months apiece, then I will be selling 6 animals a month, right? And when I re-leverage myself, effectively, every single month that goes by, I'll be selling 6 and I'll be buying 12, right? And so in this situation, if I have 0 leverage and I have 30 cattle and I'm looking to re-leverage myself, first of all, I would instantaneously have to go and buy 30 more cattle. That would put me at 60. And if I have 60 animals, then now I'm liquidating 12 animals every month, right? Now I'm liquidating 12 animals every month. And if I liquidate 12, I'll have to buy 24. Right? And, you know, and if I did that for the next 3 months, and and right now, right now I have whatever. Right now I have, I have these cattle, and, the baseline right now is 50. And, within 3 months, I will effectively have to purchase about 120 cattle, all right? 100 to 120 cattle. And, I don't really want to be in a situation where I have 120 cattle on my 10.5 acre field, all right? And it's going to be blazing hot outside. And after it gets blazing hot, it's going to start raining, all right? And so I don't want to be in a situation where I have 120 cattle on my 10.5 acre field, all right? And, the whole thing about this is that, and I've spoken about this, all right? I'm not lying about it. Legitimately, if you're going to be an idiot, then, don't take anybody else down with you, for the love of God. I am telling you the truth. I'm showing you, I legitimately, I run this business by myself. When it comes to, when it comes to the cattle business, not even just the cattle business, all right? When it comes to the broader economy, I legitimately make more money in my backyard farming commercial cattle on a 10.5 acre field than effectively the entire planet makes doing anything. Legitimately, and it is by a lot. All right, for the love of, at least try. All right, you should have a basic understanding for how these things happen. And I even tell you, and I even use broader ideas. I don't even use cattle, right? I use broader ideas. The idea of an asset. Tax deductible asset. You do not need to purchase cattle to get, cattle are not the only tax deductible asset on the entire planet. If you go and you buy a building, right? If you go and you buy a commercial building, that building has an appraisal value. That building is worth money. That is called the appraisal value. All right, and if you go and you whatever, and that building, that's the appraisal value of the building. If the building is whatever less than 30 years old, then guess what? You can depreciate the value of that building again. You can depreciate the value of that building. That's a tax write-off. If you go to the bank and you take a loan to purchase that building, the interest that you pay on your loan is a tax write-off. Right? You don't need to purchase cattle. Cattle are not the only tax deductible asset on the entire planet. I just use cattle as an example because at the end of the day, this is the business that I'm in. All right, this is the business that I'm in, and I use cattle as an example, right? Cattle are worth money. In terms of cattle, what kind of an asset is cattle, right? Is cattle a piece of real estate? Cattle is not a piece of real estate. Cattle are a commodity. And if you want to figure out the price of a commodity, how do you do it? Do you ask Billy Joe Bob? Right? Do you ask some random person that legitimately has no idea about anything? No, you go on the stock market and you look it up. If you go on the stock market and you look it up, you can check the price of any commodity on the entire planet. That is the appraisal value of your animal, all right? That is the appraisal value. When it comes to real estate, if you're going to go and you're going to buy a commercial building, if you're going to go and you're going to buy yourself a rental property, right? That property has an appraisal value. The asset is worth money. Makes a lot of sense, right? Very simple, right? It's not some complicated thing. That asset is worth money. All right, and the value of the building is taxed. The depreciation of the building, tax deduction. Interest on your loan, tax deduction. Property taxes, tax deduction. Ask your accountant about it. Don't take my word for it. Go and find an accountant that knows what they're doing and ask them about it. All right, go and find an accountant that specializes in your line of work and then ask about it. They will know, okay? They will know. The accountant will know, okay? And so, but that, it is what it is. I mean, my business is growing, and, my business is growing, but that's effectively, that's Like, I don't know how else to put it other than it just, it just is what it is. I mean, and this is the whole thing. And when I say this, I'm not meaning to sound like a prick. All right, but you have to understand, all right, how do I put this without, being like I don't, okay, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, I'm not a malicious person, okay? I'm just going to say it. And I'm just understand that I'm not a malicious person about this. I'm just saying it is what it is. You have to understand, and I've always said that at the end of the day, the people who care about you, you'll know if someone cares, whether, if you'll know if somebody cares about you, if they're happy when you succeed, right? This is something I talked about. Everybody's not your friend. All right, a lot of people are, borderline a complete moron. All right, legitimately an idiot. All right, but at the end of the day, the people who actually care about you will be happy when you're successful. All right, they will be happy when you're successful. That's the thing about people. Everybody is not your friend. All right, a lot of people are actually kind of an idiot. Will legitimately sell their soul to the devil for nothing. All right, throw Hail Marys into the middle of nowhere, magical journeys. I fell out of heaven a 7. All right, all sorts of problems. Massive list of problems, and the problems are why they're poor. All right, and at the end of the day, because here's the thing, it's like, I've always said that, like when it comes to money, all right, when it comes to something like money, you have to understand that effectively the entire planet, if you put everybody in a room, everybody in the entire country, if you put them in a room, 90% of the people would make between $3,000 and $8,000 a month. 90%, 9 out of 10 people, all right? 9 out of 10 people in that room would make between $3,000 and $9,000 a month. Somewhere between $2,500 and $9,000 a month. 90%. And when you actually take a look at the economy for what it is, if you're legitimately like borderline homeless, like you're impoverished, if you make an extra $2,000 a month, you're middle class. If you're middle class and you make $2,000 a month more, you're upper middle class. If you're upper middle class and you make $2,000 a month more, you legitimately make more money than 90% of the entire U.S. economy. In terms of individuals. All right, in a realistic sense, once you hit about $15,000 a month, if you legitimately, once you hit about $15,000 a month, the money does not do anything anymore. Within a reasonable margin, granted that you don't go and become an idiot. The money does not do anything. If you sit there and you take a look at how, I've always said that this is one of the most important things. You sit there and you understand how much money you make. Money is not complicated, right? It's a number. You just take a look at it and it's a number. All right, it's a number. It just is what it is, right? It's not complicated. It's not like a figment of your imagination. It's a number, right? You let's say that you intentionally, you say you're gonna live on $10,000 a month, right? If you bring home 15 grand and you intentionally live on $10,000 a month, right? And if you legitimately go and you live on $10,000 a month, and then you invest, all you do is buy $5,000 worth of the S&P 500 every single month for the rest of your life, you will never run out of money forever, granted that you actually budget your money. All right, granted that you understand how much money you make, and you live according to, you live within a reasonable margin of that. Granted that you don't go over that, you stick to your budget. All right, and then you can pay yourself whatever 3% of your investment portfolio a year, and that will be your raise. You can pay yourself extra money. And I've always said that the whole thing about it having an investment portfolio is why, and I use my cattle as an example. In terms of paying yourself, there is no reason to pay yourself all of the money that your investment portfolio makes. All right. And I've spoken about this. Leave the money in your investment portfolio and that money will grow. And when that money grows, that's an unrealized gain and you don't have to pay taxes on it. All right. It's very, it just is what it is. All right. You leave your money in your investment portfolio. Okay. But, here's the thing, and the thing about like a situation like me, you have to understand that, as of today, $2,000 a month is less than 5% of the money that I make. It's less than 5%. All right, I could, like if I took a look at somebody's financials, if I took a look at it, I could legitimately, I could probably, find a way to put together, even for the average person, and even then, it'd be very easy to make an extra $2,000 a month. It wouldn't be difficult. All right, it might legitimately just be, go into, whatever, right? Start yourself an LLC. Right, if you're, whatever, go into, in terms of cattle, it could be as simple as start yourself an LLC and write off your expenses on your cattle, right? It could be as simple as that, and that would save money on your tax bill. It could be as simple as just leverage some of your income and buy yourself an asset. You have to buy yourself an asset. And this whole idea of, and I've even spoken about this, about the 10% mark, because let's say that you whatever, right? You go and you buy yourself a, but here's the thing, all right? If your entire life, you have to purchase yourself an asset, okay? Buy yourself an asset that you understand. Stocks have a good tax benefit on the back end, because when your money grows, you don't have to pay taxes on the growth of the money. All right, in terms of real estate, real estate has good tax benefits, but the in terms of the percentage of appreciation of your money, in terms of how much does your money grow, your money really only grows if you leverage for it. All right, because if you legitimately pay for an entire property cash and then rent it out, and you make a 7% return a year, but even then it's not worth it. Because if you're going to make 7% a year, you might as well just have bought the S&P 500, because now you don't have to fix your building and et cetera, et cetera. But you can also write off the depreciation of your house or whatever, of your rental property. But there are a lot of ways to make money. A lot of ways to make money. If you ask a rich person how to make money, it's very easy. All right, it's not complicated. It is not complicated. And in all honesty, in terms of moving up in the world, if you increase the amount of money that you're making by $2,000 a month, it effectively puts you in an entire new financial situation. Legitimately, if you're on the street corner and you're impoverished, if you're legitimately standing on the corner of a street and you're homeless, if you make an extra and you're begging for money, you're panhandling and you're making your money. If you made an extra $2,000 a month, you would be effectively middle class. If you're middle class and you make an extra $2,000 a month, you're effectively upper middle class. If you're upper middle class and you make an extra $2,000 a month, you are effectively making more money than 90% of anybody in the entire country. That's about how it pans out. You go from $2,000 a month to $4,000 a month, $4,000 to $6,000 a month, and then $6,000 a month to $8,000 a month. You're effectively making more money than 90% of the entire country. All right, money is not, this whole oh my God, I need to go and make $1 million. You don't need to make $1 million, all right? You don't need $1 million to be rich. You don't. All right, in terms of a realistic sense, and the big idea, the way that I describe this idea is, even if I had nothing, if I legitimately only had $5,000 to my name, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years by starting myself a cattle business, no problem. Legitimately would not even be difficult. That's the big idea, right? Even if I had no money and I had to redo everything from the very beginning, and I had $5,000 to my name, I could easily turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years, and it wouldn't even be difficult. You don't need money. And this is also why and I know this sounds horrible, but don't ask, in terms of money, you have to understand that, a lot of people, if you legitimately believe that you cannot do something because you don't have the money, you're probably in a situation that you've quit on your dream because of $1,000. It's a very realistic possibility. I cannot do it because I don't have the money. Well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about cattle? Are we talking about fertilizer? I mean, what are we talking about? Right, because I've already said, in terms of buying more cattle, how do you do it? How do I do it? Right, I buy, if I have $5,000, I take that $5,000 and I invest the money. I stabilize my asset. I purchase these assets at their appraisal value, and I purchase commodity type animals. I stabilize the asset. Once the asset is stabilized, I leverage against it. That's it. That's how I grow my herd. I don't go and leverage myself to the eyeballs. I don't go, oh my God, I just need to throw $1 million at this thing. I take the money that I have and I invest the money. When I invest the money, I purchase assets at their appraisal values, and then I stabilize the asset. And while I stabilize the asset has gone up in value. Then I leverage against the number of animals that I have, and that's what grows my herd. At the end of the day, when I liquidate the animals, I take my earnings and I reinvest them, and that grows my herd. That's what buys me cattle. That's how I buy my cattle, all right? And another very realistic way to take a look at this is, you see these animals here. Very soon I will start having to liquidate these animals. And when I liquidate these animals, I will legitimately have enough money to buy more than, I will have more than, 75 animals when it's all said and done. And if I leverage against that, it'll be 100. It'll probably be closer to 120 than anything. It'll probably be close to about 120. And that'll take me about 3 months. Right? I take the money that my business makes and I put it back into my business. That's how I grow my business, all right? And in a realistic sense, even if I legitimately had nothing and I had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years with no problem. It wouldn't even be difficult. And at that point, money would no longer matter again. I could go and fry chicken at Wingstop and make my whatever $100,000 a year in the cattle business, and I would still never worry about money again. I'll probably make over $40,000 in the next 30 days. What am I going to do with the money? Grow my business, all right? Legitimately, that it is what it is. Nobody cares about an opinion. Oh my God, well, I thought. Nobody cares what you thought. You're poor, and you're going to die poor. All right, I don't know how well, legitimately it's borderline pathetic. All right, and it's not funny because at the end of the day, it's like, you could the average person could drastically improve their output very easily. It's not even hard, right? If you legitimately go out into the world and you find somebody who knows what they're doing, it's not just me. There are plenty of people in all sorts of the parts of the economy, right? You got people in stocks, you got people in commercial real estate, you got people in business acquisition, you have people in all of these different sectors of the economy, service and hospitality, whatever it may be. I mean, you legit, investment banking, you have, whatever, right? I mean, you have people in all different parts of the economy making drastic sums of money, and find somebody that whatever, that you can, whatever, when you take a look at what they're doing, it makes sense to you, and then see how they do it. Because I've always, and the whole thing, like when it comes to the cattle business, right? I don't give out my opinion. If you asked me how I do it, I would just flat out tell you exactly how I do it. I legitimately make more money as a cattleman in my backyard than anybody on the planet makes doing anything, and I can tell you exactly how I do it. All right, I go and I take my capital, I invest my capital, I purchase these assets, and I purchase a commodity type animal. This is how I appraise the value of the animal, take a look at the stock market, and then I take these animals and I put them on this diet, etc., etc. This is how I grow my grass. This is how much money I make, etc. I would just flat out tell you exactly how I do it. All right, and you don't want to be in a situation, because there is a very realistic possibility where when you listen to somebody who has legitimately, if like, to me, the golden words of failure, of legitimate poorness, is I cannot do something because I don't have the money. That is legitimately the most clear indicator that you're dealing with a poor person, because number one, they probably dug themselves into a hole, and if anything, their hole is getting bigger every single day. All right, they're making their situation worse. All right, or number two, they are legitimately giving up on their dreams because they don't have $1,000. Like, if you asked me, how much money does it cost for me to grow my grass? In terms of a fundamental idea, none of this costs me anything. This makes me money. This costs me negative money. It costs me like negative, it costs me negative money. Negative tens of, I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on this cattle business. Hundreds of thousands. It doesn't cost me anything. All right, and even if I were going to consider a fertilizer as an expense, and I took the high end of my expenses, how much does fertilizer cost me on a yearly basis to run about 150 cattle a year? How much does my fertilizer cost me? Maybe like $4,000, $3,000, $3,000, $4,000, something like that. Cattle farming does not cost me anything. This does not cost me anything, all right? This makes me money, a massive amount of money. I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I would actually anticipate that my income goes over $1 million a year by the end of this year. I would be willing to bet. All right, I would legitimately bet that my income goes over $1 million a year by the end of this year. Farming does not cost me anything, all right? It doesn't cost me anything. All right, investing in general, in terms of a generalized idea, investing capital does not cost you anything. You are trading your money for something that is equally as valuable as the money to get a positive return on your capital. And the reason you do this is because your money is not going to make any money. If it's your cash is not going to do anything. That's why you do it. If anything, it's going to go down in value because of inflation. All right, that's why you do it. You take your money, you invest it into something that is equally as valuable as the money. You have purchased yourself an equitable asset at its appraisal value. If you legitimately want your money back, you can liquidate your asset. The reason that you do this is so that you get a positive return on your money. Because if you don't do that and you're holding on to cash, your cash is not going to do anything. And if anything, it's going to go down in value because of inflation. That's why you do it. And at the end of the day, the reason that you do that is because that positive return turns into money for you. All right, if you do not have assets that produce you a positive return, then you will have to work for every dollar that you have for the rest of your life. You will get taxed the most. All right, and then congratulations, you're going to die poor. I would be willing to bet you are going to die poor. All right, legitimately, you will die poor, and then you'll just be swept. And then you that's what's going to happen. All right, your life is not going to turn into a Disneyland adventure. Oh my God! Well, I fell out of heaven at 7. Nobody cares. You're legitimately going to die poor. That's what's going to happen. Borderline a bum for the rest of your life. All right, if you have assets and they produce you positive returns and you have purchased your assets at appraisal values and you have a good asset, the value of your asset should even go up. All right, and and it just that's how it just. And this is how I made my money, all right? When you take a look at what I do, I effectively make more money than anybody on the entire planet. I legitimately did so well farming that I out-earned the entire planet. All right, and if you were to ask me, how do I run the cattle business? How do I run a cattle business? I would tell you exactly how I do it. I actually do this in real life. It's not my opinion. I'm not just going on I'm not just giving you my opinion. I actually do this in real life. And that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.